All right, so last time we looked at how to deal with gravity a little bit. So if I have a room, I'm able to move around a little bit smoothly, able to jump, things like that. Now the problem is that the way we did it before, every time you hit the side of a wall, it would stop you. And also if you would hit like the bottom of one of these bricks, so if I create a little floating island here, if I hit the bottom, it allows me to jump again, which doesn't make any sense. Really what I need is I need to make it so that when I hit the left side, the right side, the bottom, and the top, it actually behaves differently. Now, solid actually causes problems. On the wall ground, I actually have to turn solid off. And the reason why is, by default, if you hit a solid object, it stops you and sets your direction to 0. Which is, the reason why that's a problem is, if I like hit from below, and I say move to contact, my direction is 0, so I go shooting to the right over to this thing here. So what I actually have to do is I have to manually make it so that this avatar doesn't move into the walls. So when you run into a solid object, it keeps you from moving inside of that object. If it's not solid, it moves you just inside where you've contacted it, and then it calls the collision event. So I actually have to manually move back out of the wall when that happens. So I've made some alterations to avatar. Ground is not solid now. Avatar, when I collide with the ground, I have to actually do a lot more. First thing I need to do is I need to jump back to where I was before I ran into the wall. In particular, there are two variables that keep track of where I was. There's x previous and y previous. These are built in. Wherever I was the previous step, that's what these two variables keep track of. So if I hit the ground, I'm actually inside the ground for a moment. I move back outside, move until I'm actually contacting that guy, and then I start doing a check to see which way did I hit the ground. If there is a ground object just below me, so that's positive y, so 1 below me, if that's the ground, then I'm allowed to jump again, and I make sure that I stop moving, so I don't move into it again the very next step. If I hit the ground and it's just above me, so -1 in the y direction, then I just set my vertical speed to 0, but I don't reset my jumping, so I can't just like headbutt into the bottom of that thing over and over again. And then I check to the right, and if I check to the right, then I'm going to set my horizontal speed to 0. Check to the left, set my horizontal speed to 0. So I actually am checking this ground object in all the different directions to make sure that I'm not moving into it. The end step remains the same, so I'm still checking below me to see if there's an object. The only difference is I'm checking against all objects rather than just against solid objects, because the ground is no longer solid. If I do this, I'm going to get pulled into the ground because of gravity. So otherwise, that remains the same. I've also altered my left and right commands a little bit. So notice that these are left keyboard events, not just key press events. So it's got the keyboard symbol, not the key press. And what I'm doing is I'm checking to my left, and if there's nothing there, then I go ahead and move to the left. So it's constantly checking. The reason why is in a lot of these games, if I'm holding down the left key and I'm moving along a wall, usually when I'm no longer being blocked by the wall, I want to move over. So if holding on left, notice at the top, I move over. If I did a key press, I would just do an up and down movement. So this allows me to do smooth movement along walls and I don't get blocked. Also, when I hit from below, it doesn't allow me to jump out over and over again. But from above, now I can jump. Now remember, the only way this works is if I have my center at the very bottom. And one way that you can check to make sure you have it precisely in the right place, if you look at the modify mask, the bottom number is this number right here. So notice that I've set my Y position, 31, to be exactly the bottom of the sprite, 31. And I do that for every sprite that I'm going to be using, so that I make sure that all of my collisions are done correctly. So the main changes for this are making sure the ground's not solid, having a much more complicated collision event with the ground, and altering the left and right a little bit. The final thing is making sure that you're checking for all objects below you, so you turn gravity off for that. One more thing I should warn you about. It is possible that if you have gravity up too high, if you jump from the very high point, so let's say I go over to this thing up here, and I jump really high, it is possible if you have gravity too high that by the time you reach the ground, you are moving so fast you jump beyond the ground. So there's a couple ways to deal with this. If you like having that kind of gravity and you want to keep it in your game, what you might do is make it so that you have a terminal velocity. So every step, if your downward speed is greater than like the size of your ground object, then you can actually just make it so that that is your maximum speed. Another thing about this is, when I have this ground object working perfectly, I can use this to represent anything that's solid in my game. All I do is I place these ground objects where I want things to be solid, and I make them invisible. So I can have whatever background I want, make it look any way I want, and anything that represents a solid, I just put these solid blocks in and make them invisible. So I'll be able to see them in the room, but during the game I won't see them. I'll still be able to interact with them, and it'll still act like ground, but it'll look like whatever's in the background. So that's a tricky way that a lot of games are dealt with, is you actually make invisible collision blocks and just have the code for that block once, and then draw whatever you want over the top of it.